All right, we're rolling.
What's going on, guys? My name is Jaden and Edison. I'm the multimedia editor of the University Star, podcast producer at KTSW 89.9. Make sure y'all tune into the Sam Mo Show, one of the best podcasts in San Marcos. Shout out to Jaden and Cleveland. Shout out to the Sam Mo Show. Check us out.
What's up, San Martians? Welcome back to the Sam Mo Show. I'm your host with the San Most, Cleveland. And joining me today is University Star's very own local photographer, multimedia editor, and dare I say, a local legend,
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Jaden Edison. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here at the Sam Mo Show. It's been a long time coming, I guess, since hearing about it last semester. But I'm excited to be here for sure.
How's your week been?
It's been pretty good. Just busy. Nothing short of so much news stuff going on, and then on top of that, having to do classes, all the general stuff that we go through as students. So it's been a lot, but we're closing it out strong.
It's that first crunch of the semester when the exams start coming up.
Most definitely, and I even felt like week 2 and week 3, it felt like week 12 for the semester.
Oh, I mean, and the first test I always think is like the worst because you don't know what to really expect from the professor. Right. But now, especially for like Spanish, I'm like, I get it now. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be easier than I thought it was going to be. Because, Spanish 2 is hard.
Yeah, definitely. And then you read those Rate My Professors, and you kind of base your opinion on what might, or you base, you never know what it's going to be. You read those reviews, and it can be really bad, it can be really good, but you really don't know until
I try not to. I try not to read the Rate My Professor stuff. Because I feel like it would taint my view.
Yeah, that's true.
Afterwards, usually you're like sometime mid-semester, I'm like, okay, what are other people thinking?
Right.
And then, depending on...
Right, and the thing about Rate My Professor is really... you may have bad reviews from students who just don't put a lot into the class, so you gotta kind of take some of it with a grain of salt. But
and that's the thing too. When you're looking at reviews, like a majority of them are either people who had like a really positive experience or a really negative experience. Right. Anybody who had like an okay 3-star time is not gonna like report on it.
That's true. You got a point there for sure.
Oh, man, the news week has been out of control.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Especially at the Star. A lot of breaking news going on.
Yeah, so last night, right? The Mill Street shooting?
Yes.
They arrested the guy in, Crawley, Louisiana?
Yeah, in Louisiana. And that's funny that we were talking about that in the newsroom earlier. And I just, I was reading the brief, and I'm like, okay, so the shooting happens 2 nights ago. Yeah. And then 2 days later, the guy drove off to Louisiana, and that's where he's captured. I just thought the oddity of all that was...
He moved fast.
Yeah, I was like, that's a long drive right there from San Marcos to Louisiana.
Does UPD say anything about, motivation behind that?
The only thing we know so far is just through... because this is not necessarily a on-campus incident. So this is the San Marcos Police Department thing where, they released the information of the individual yesterday in a brief, giving us a mugshot of what the gentleman looks like, and all those things. So we'll learn more as the days come on. But now we know that he's been apprehended and all those things.
That's at least the upside of it.
Yeah.
The other big news this week was the Vie Lofts.
The Vie Lofts, the man, crazy. Spent my whole Friday night out there at 10 o'clock at night outside those apartments.
They just call you up and you're like...
Yeah. So what happened was just the whole thing just from top to bottom. So, we have the University Star, we communicate through an app called Slack. So our whole organization is in Slack. And we have different channels for different things, but we have a general channel where everybody at the Star is in that. We communicate. So when things like breaking news happens, or we just want to crack jokes, all those things, that's where it happens in the general channel. So something like the Vie Lofts situation, somebody sent a message, and it's like, have you guys seen this? And our editor-in-chief, Jacob, who is a vampire who's always up and checking his email and all that, he had already seen it on social media. So, we have a formal breaking news process to where, we want to make sure that we're covering things, one, efficiently and accurately. So it's an ordeal where, one, we want to get it out on social media, we want to let the people know. And then after that, you want to get a little bit, some type of writing out. And then we'll build on that as more information becomes available.
So it's just kind of like the bat signal, whenever that happens, they're like, get on it, move.
Yeah, all hell breaks loose for sure. With that, Jacob, he's directing everybody in different positions, and he's like, he messages me, he's like, Jaden, you want to ride? And I'm like, oh, let's go, let's get it. Yeah. So, he comes and gets me from my apartment at like 9:30, maybe a little bit before, but late at night. And we roll to the scene. We go there. It's chaos. You got, the fire chief and the fire marshal out there. You got representatives from the city out there. Then obviously in the parking garage, you have cars backed up trying to come out because all 160 plus residents had to be evacuated.
Yeah, and now from what I understood in the article, it's a foundational issue.
Right. So it's really interesting. So what started off was, individuals found, cracks in the wall, something with the staircase, and so on and so forth. So the sense we got from it, from the explanation from the fire marshal and the fire chief is, and they blatantly said this, is that they didn't want another iconic village situation.
Yeah.
Where, something crazy happens that if you had taken some precautionary measures before, you probably could have prevented it.
Yeah.
So this was, vastly like a precautionary thing where, they saw these things and they didn't really know how in depth it was or the detail or the magnitude to how serious this was. So they just, pulled the plug and said, all right, let's get everybody out of here and we'll figure it out going forward.
And I've heard that the owners of the lofts knew for a while about these issues.
And it's interesting. So, on top of that, you have, so days go on, they have Monday, this past Monday, they have engineers on the site to do their inspections. So, the inspections go by, the city's they're cooperative. I mean, they're telling us, but at the same time, there's not a lot of promptness to, there's not a lot of, they're taking their kind of time to kind of tell us what's going on, right? So, we get an alert yesterday from the city that tells us that, okay, in a nutshell, what it says is that it may not have been as serious as we, first thought it was. So, the issue with the staircase and all those other things are completely separate from the structural integrity of the building. So with that being said, we're hoping that in the next week we can get the residents back in their apartments. So it's just been a whole flip of just different things going on.
Man, I would hate to be one of those kids.
Most definitely.
Moving back and forth like that, especially this is crunch time the semester right
Most
now.
Definitely. And even another interesting aspect of it that I'll just throw in there is that, so I live, at the Avenue Apartments in San Marcos. So I get a text maybe around 6:30 on the night that the incident happened, where all the residents got evacuated, and they tell me, hey, you're gonna have, you may have some people move into your apartment tonight. So this is before I found out about the Vie Lofts situation. Yeah. So I'm like, they're just, nobody's gonna move in. So then fast forward 2 hours later, I get a call from the Avenue. They call me, before it was a text. So they call me now and they say, hey, we're sorry, but you're gonna have 3 new roommates tonight, and they're gonna be living with you. So in my head, I'm like, okay, what's going on? I was kind of upset. I'm like, okay, no notice or any of that. But at the same time, Jacob and I are pulling up to the Vie Lofts apartments, and I'm like, wait, does this have anything to do with Vie Lofts? And the people are like, this together. Is exactly what it is. Yeah. So, just being it now is 3 new roommates who I'm just talking to and kind of dissecting the situation. It's just everybody's really impacted and affected by this.
Yeah, and I heard they're either at one of the parent company's other properties, or they're at the embassy suites. Right.
So from what I understand, and I'm not 100% sure about this, so don't quote me, but I believe that the Avenue Apartments, which is where I live, are owned by the same management that owns the Vie Lofts. But I'm not 100% certain, but that's what I've heard. But on top of that, you have students in hotels. I have a friend who's in a hotel right now who has to move to another hotel, just moving around. And then on top of that, you do have the Vie Lofts who are telling these people that, okay, we're going to cover the expenses of the hotels and all those things. So these are all developments that remain to be seen, what's going to happen.
Well, and then, this is coming off the heels of the Haven last week, where essentially these students, I don't want to say they got scammed, but they definitely were lied to.
Right.
Because they were guaranteed a fall move-in. It's the apartment complex, right behind Bobcat Stadium.
The Haven at Thorpe Lane.
Yeah. And so they got basically told that the rooms aren't ready, and they probably won't be ready for another, month or so?
Right.
And so, actually, funny enough, I was at the football game last Saturday, and one of the guys next to me was just talking about it. He's like, yeah, I have to drive home now after this game, because I could be able to walk to the apartments right there, but I have to drive all the way back to San Antonio now, because I'm supposed to be living at the Haven. And they already signed lease. A lot of students are trying to break lease with the company now, understandably.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
From a leaser's perspective, it's like, okay, you guarantee to move in by this date. why am I still paying for this? Either I get free rent for the rest of the time I'm here, or I'm walking out. Because I mean, I wouldn't want to spend another dollar with them.
And rightfully so. You know, you have these students who are promised, you know, certain things. Not even just students, just general. You know, whoever signs a lease, you know, through that lease, they're promised certain things. And when you're not able to follow through, then that's definitely going to, you know, create a problem. And on top of that, I feel like there's a balance between how these apartments are reacting, because at the same time, it's like they don't want to forget the human aspect of this. It's like, okay, people are affected by this. Like with Vie Lofts, perfect example. People are affected by this. They had to move out of their apartment, you know, with little notice. They can only grab their laptop and a bag, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you can come back and get it later. But on top of that, from a business standpoint, you have these apartments that don't want people breaking leases, because obviously, you know, going forward, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be lawsuits or whether it be just people not wanting to sign there because of these events that are happening right now. So there's like a business side and a human side that you're seeing how these apartments are reacting.
Well, a lot of these new apartments are cropping up everywhere. And I think my least favorite one right now is the Aspire, which is, you know, I'm sure you've seen it, the gigantic
blocking
one.
the
skyline. Blocking the arch view.
Right.
That's such an eyesore. I don't know why they were allowed to build there, or even that tall.
Right. It's really interesting, and that's something that a lot of people, you know, are you hear a lot of uproar about, just us doing our multimedia projects and all that. Just hearing the talk of the campus, like a lot of students are you know, upset, you know, about these developments, and you know, they feel like that, you know, these developments aren't really congruent with I guess the land, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like we don't have, you know, the landscape to, I don't really know how to put it into words, but the landscape to, you know, have these developments, and is really, you know, affecting.
Well, I mean, the city's outgrowing itself in a lot of ways. And I don't know, especially because with the Aspire, like I was saying a couple episodes ago, when I was up in College Station, they have another apartment complex that is identical to the one being built here. So this isn't like something unique or special. It's just another like cookie cutter design they dropped into San Marcos.
Right.
And it's going to ruin our skyline now.
Right.
And I don't know, it's just, I feel like, and it's air quote luxury living, but it's tough, because I get like there's more demand for housing.
Right.
At the same time, the university isn't really helping out with that. And in a lot of ways, I was seeing some people on Twitter and stuff saying it's almost like a predatory nature, because you can only really stay on campus for 1 year. I mean, you're forced to. But after that, I mean, you're encouraged to move off, because how many freshmen we bring in, the classes keep getting bigger, so it's harder and harder to house people. And so basically you get stuck with these predatory relationships with some of these apartment complexes that charge you upwards of $800 a month to stay in, you know, not necessarily luxury conditions. And I mean, I understand location's part of it, but for a lot of these cases, I mean, you see like with Vie Lofts, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be wrong, I think, to maybe assume that part of the reason these structural issues are cropping up is because the building was built in such a hurry.
Right.
There's such a hurry to get to the market and get as much, you know, leasing done as possible, that where they basically rush, they cut corners, and then students are at risk because of that. I mean, I would not want to sign with the Vie Lofts going forward just because of that. I'm not sure if I would want to move back in.
So, and students have every right to feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just the nature of it. You know, and you know, with so much growth, you know, in San Marcos, especially with the university being in the heart of the city, you know, it's inevitable. This is going to continue to happen and continue to happen and continue to happen. And when, you know, you talk about the predatory nature of things, you know, if you ever notice, you know, there is a difference between just general apartment housing as opposed to student housing. You know, when it comes to, you know, the student side of things, you may have more students who are more reluctant to speak up about, you know, problems happening, or management being slow to respond, or whatever the case may be, as opposed to you go to, you know, just general house, like an apartment in Austin, so to speak, that has nothing to do with, that's not, you know, student housing. Those people are on it. They're going to be on it. If there's a leak in the ceiling, you're going to hear about it in the next 5 minutes.
Well, because students don't have as much leverage most of the time as regular, like, 26-year-old or something like that, because they really can break lease. And part of the thing I was also seeing online saying, you know, if your apartment's in, you know, really poor conditions, what you can ultimately do is say, you know, you pull up the contract, say, I'm supposed to have a working stove. I'm supposed to have a working refrigerator, all this stuff to pay lease, to be on your end of the contract for you to hold up. So if you don't fix this in a timely manner, then I have no reason to pay rent for this month.
Right.
And so, it was actually, I think a woman on Twitter was talking about it, and said they fixed it the next day. The second you start using the leverage you have in that contract,
exactly,
it's the second you can start.
And that's where it is. Being a student, like a lot of students don't know about this stuff going into it. So you're going in, you just think you're signing a lease, and you really don't know what's in the nucleus of what you're signing, right? Yeah. So, and that's where the predatory nature comes in. So you've seen the university, as especially as freshmen, when you're in those seminar classes, they have the attorney for students come in and explain that you probably should have a lawyer reading over these things. Like all these things are real things, and these apartments. If you, when you're signing these leases, they very much so have the leverage.
Especially if you don't know what you're working with,
right?
Too.
Most definitely.
Well, and the part of the thing too is, and I guess the example's blatantly clear with the Haven, is that I remember the one thing I took away from that meeting with the attorney for students is never sign a lease on a building that's not done yet. Because whether it's intentionally misleading or not, sometimes shit just happens. And you have in some cases either like weather issues or maybe like contract issues that hold construction projects over for longer than they're due. And so always be very wary of these companies that say it will be done by this date, because it almost never goes that way. And so that's part of the reason I'm kind of reluctant about the Aspire apartment complex too.
Right.
Because it's supposed to be available next fall, like this time next year.
Right.
And they made a lot of progress over the summer, but especially once we get into winter months,
right, with
the weather getting as poor as it usually does around here, I don't know about that.
I'm really interested to see the trend of where as more people come into San Marcos, to see how with things like the Vie Lofts and the Haven, all those apartment situations, like these are things that people are going to learn about coming into the city.
Yeah.
So it'll be really, really interesting to see where we see more students signing at some of these older apartments, or how the Vie Lofts, if they can bounce back going forward, like all those statistical things.
And talk about the impact this has on the environment
right
out here with the constant construction and dust and dirt getting thrown basically everywhere.
Right.
Everything around here goes back into the river, so
right.
That has a big effect on it. I don't know, because I feel like the one solution, I talked actually briefly with this with Tucker and Corey when they were on the show a couple of weeks ago, is potentially capping admissions for the university, because that's ultimately something the university president makes, that decision. But in general, because they made a good case for both, because on one hand we are growing incredibly fast. But on the other hand, if we stop growing at like a certain rate where we cap admissions, we also stop getting funding for it from the state. Not we get bankrupted by the state, but we don't get as much as we would if we continue to grow. And so it's a matter of where we're going into, because we're also surrounded by the river and a lot of other important ecosystems. So we have to probably start building on top of ourselves soon, and that could have rough impacts on student life in general. It's a tough situation because there's no good way to cut it.
Most definitely, and I think something that I'm looking forward to just doing over the next few weeks is really dissecting and looking at these other surrounding college towns, because you may find a trend where these things are happening, like obviously in Austin,
College Station too. Station too is it's collapsing on itself because how much they've had to grow.
Right, and
the problem is, the people there aren't there year round. It's very seasonal. Whenever semesters are going on, the town's alive, but then as soon as people leave, it's dead.
Right. And
you have these gigantic, expensive apartment complexes that don't always hold rooms and stuff. And it's, College Station over the past 20 years has changed drastically. It's
exactly
almost unrecognizable.
Exactly, and I think you'll see that trend across. Like San Marcos is a perfect example. 40,000 plus, and we had our biggest freshman class in history, right?
Yeah.
So these things, and the freshman classes are only going to get bigger.
I was forward. Like, we're the biggest freshman class when I came in last year, and
right?
Then, now they're all the new freshmen like, we're the biggest freshmen. Like, you're not special. Well,
we were all the biggest when we first got here.
Yeah, and then we just keep growing.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think too with a lot of these complexes is they drive up the price of living too, because and there was an op-ed in the University Star. They were talking about basically how there are also a lot of young professionals that like to live in San Marcos, just because it's a nice midway point between San Antonio and Austin, which are two big industry hubs. And it's becoming more and more like living in Austin around here because of how expensive things are getting just to live around here.
Right.
And I mean, that's something we need to take into account going forward. And the city council's been railing against it lately. They said they need to stop approving basically land for built by the bedroom companies. And I think that's the first step you can take. But at the same time, as a person who moved in with 3 other random roommates, that's a hard sell for me because I don't know any of these 3 people. And and if one of us has a problem getting, you know, money for rent, then we're all going to get hit for it. And so there's pros and cons to both of that. And ultimately comes down to, I think, striking the right balance, but that's going to be hard.
It is. And like I said, these are all, you know, the battles that the people who continue to come in are going to have to continue to fight because, you know, if you don't, you know, the status quo will be the status quo, right? Yeah. So I'm really interested to see, you know, in the coming years, especially, you know, after I graduate, you know, what actually does happen and how things move forward. Right.
I mean, thankfully, the University Star is there to usually report on it and hold people accountable to it.
And that's the biggest thing. It's just you know holding people accountable and letting the student body really know, you know, what's really going on.
Actually, I want to talk to you kind of about your job at the University Star. So what in particular do you do as a multimedia editor?
So as the multimedia editor, our staff is in control of pretty much all the visuals you see. So, you know, they're really, the way I think of it is broken up into 3 different branches. So you have social media, you know, when it comes to, you know, our shows, the Star Rundown, you know, Star with the Star, which is like a promotion of our paper every Tuesday that we put up. We do something cool with the newspaper, and we usually base a theme off the front page. So this week, you know, Vie Lofts was the dominant story. So, you know, we had one of our multimedia journalists, Angelina, go out in front of the Vie Lofts, and she did a cool visual with that. So that's another thing we do. You know, Wednesday, you know, we do the quad talks. We do our Wild Art of the Week. We do our new tailgate show that just comes out. So all those things are multimedia productions, and you may have different people from different sections jump in. So that's really the social media branch. It's just having a social media presence so people know. You know, the biggest thing is that you never want to be, you know, this hidden organization that nobody really knows, you know, what's going on. So, you know, when you look at our, you know, our different things we do on social media, you know, it's really big for me as multimedia editor to make sure I'm honing in and telling our people to make sure that the people we're talking to reflect what Texas State's campus looks like. So if you look at, you know, our quad talk, you'll see a variety of people from different races, ethnicities, whatever it is, sexual orientation.
Actually, I was on the quad talk today.
All those things. Yeah,
I was on there today.
You were on quad talk. Yeah, so
talking about the Vie Lofts.
Right. So, you know, that. And then even something like Star Rundown, which we used to record in Studio C, which is a studio in our building. We moved it to our newsroom, so you can see, you know, what our work environment looks like. So all those things. So that's the social media branch, and then obviously going to the online stuff, where we want to make sure we're implementing, you know, different photos, videos, audios, you know, across, you know, the spectrum to kind of not only complement the written words, but sometimes tell the story better than the words can, you know, through visuals. And then obviously through our newspaper, those are mostly photo and illustration driven. And
speaking of visuals in general, you are also a photographer.
Right. So I picked up a camera, and really time has flown by, and it really hasn't even been that long, but I just feel like I picked up, you know, so fast. I picked it up in August of 2018. So
I was going to ask when you started
doing that. A little over a year, and I would say that if it wasn't for the Star, like, I wouldn't be anywhere near, you know, where I am now as far as just the connections and you know, different opportunities I've had by just having a camera. So.
Is that how you got your start with Star?
Yeah, so, you know, I started off at the Star in spring of 2018 as an opinions columnist. So I was writing opinions for about a year. You know, our former editor-in-chief, Carson King, he was the opinions editor at the time. So he hired me, brought me on, and I stuck around there. And Carrington became editor-in-chief. And for me, I just felt like the week-to-week just grind of just writing opinions, I just felt like it was starting to feel a little bit redundant, and I wanted something new. So in my head, it's like, okay, what's the next thing that I can do to kind of to level up? And it was, I'm going to get a camera. So, you know, just, you know, through different blessings and all those things, you know, I got a camera from my aunt. She ended up getting a new camera because she felt like the one that she had was too big. So I was like, you know, I'll take it. Yeah. She sent it to me. And the next day I was out in Austin. I was shooting stuff. You know, I was out there just hanging around and, just doing that. And then, you know, I started, you know, taking on more assignments. Carrington and Cam, our former multimedia editor, they they wanted me to be the assistant multimedia editor. So I came in, got some editorial board experience, got to stick around and see how like the hierarchy of the Star works as opposed to just being on general staff and learn those things. And and when Jacob Rodriguez, our former sports editor, got brought on as the editor in chief. Yeah. And we had a conversation, and he was like, let's do it. So, been doing multimedia now. So I've been there, almost 2 years in spring 2020.
Okay, so I'm trying to think timeline-wise. Spring 2018, because I got here 2019. Mm-hmm. So was that when the whole Connor Clegg thing was going on?
So, yeah, Connor Clegg would have been spring 2018, correct? Yeah, because the month before.
Because I know the Star was, he threatened to defund the Star?
Yeah, so that was all. So that actually happened as far as the column that happened that led to all the other events. That happened in fall 2017. So that was the semester before I got to the Star.
It's a long time in coming.
Right, so with that was, I was just a new student on campus, and I heard about the Star and all the controversy with the column that was written, and the next semester I saw an opportunity to apply, and I feel like why not, and even throughout the interview process it was really, you could tell that everybody was really all in on trying to rebuild the brand of the Star and what the Star is really about, and get back to the stuff that we do best, and that's being a mouthpiece for the student body and for the university, holding everybody accountable, representing everybody from point A to point B and all those things. So I really got those vibes throughout the interview, so I was brought on. But the Clegg stuff, that all followed right after.
Did you take any? Were you there for the whole sit-in thing? Did you take any pictures?
So I was at that time. I want to say during the sit-in and stuff, I wasn't taking photos at that point. Yeah, I hadn't even had a camera at that point. So really, for me, it was really just watching and trying to glean ideas for different columns and all that, and then just helping out, where I could. But it was a really interesting time. I was at those at the SG meetings and just hearing out the student forums and all those things. I was there the night that Connor Clegg got impeached. Yeah. Where the news outlets were out there. He was interviewed. I have a picture on my phone and my Snapchat memories of Connor Clegg standing there talking to the news broadcast station. So yeah, it was really crazy times, but memorable for
because
sure.
I mean, as a newly elected senator for student government, like all the older senators always talk about like that is like the moment kind of thing. I don't know, student, of course, I was there last spring for the whole controversy too. It's been a rocky road for student government these past couple of years.
And I think every year, it's inevitable. You have so many students coming in, there will be more issues that come up. Well, I will say that, just from a journalist standpoint, is that the biggest thing has always been just, we want to hold everybody accountable. So when it comes from student government, from top to bottom, we want to be fair. We want to give everybody, fair coverage and all those things. But I will say that, through Corey Bimbo and Tucker Thompson, they've been extremely transparent with everything going on, all different developments. Really, reached out to the Star to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what we do as a media organization and what student government does.
You're supposed to hold us accountable.
Right,
and that's the best move. Right. Actually, do you see last meeting? I don't know I think it came in the paper or somewhere online, but Alexa Browning resigned very publicly. Last meeting.
Our student government beat reporter. I was just talking to her about that yesterday. She was there covering it. Sierra Martin. I haven't really gotten into the nucleus of it all, but
as a senator, I hardly understand what's going on. I know it's something internally with the cabinet. I think there was division in the cabinet about things. I don't. Mainly, it's the hot topic issue right now is around the No Free Labor Act that one of the senators has been pushing. Essentially states that the president's cabinet and staff should not be unpaid. And I don't know how I feel about it because I've sided with him on the raising minimum wage for students because especially for student workers, it's tough conditions they work in. Yeah. So for that kind of thing. But with the cabinet positions, usually, these are volunteers. No one's forcing me to be a senator. No one's forcing, so-and-so to be chief of staff. And if it really comes down to it, and I don't want them to because they do great work, but if they really feel like they are like on borderline, horrible conditions working and they can't do this, they have every right to resign, and no one's going to stop them from resigning. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of it. And I didn't. The piece as a whole, it mentioned the 13th Amendment and stuff, and talking about slave labor. I'm like, this is far from slave labor, for one, and secondly, I mean, like I said, it's volunteer work, and also it seems kind of weird for the Senate to kind of cut itself a paycheck. Mm-hmm. And mind you, we're already on a very tight budget compared to last year, which I don't think. I'd be naive to say that the controversy last year had nothing to do with us getting a pay cut. In general, I mean, it is an unpaid position, and if you really feel like it takes up too much of your time, you can leave, and that's what a lot of senators have been doing. That I think we'll be holding special elections soon, mm-hmm. So if anybody listening is interested in joining student government, in a couple of weeks it might be your chance.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, I mean, we do need more senators and more people that care. It's part of it is, I mean, it is a big time commitment. I'll be honest, like we start at 5, and we usually don't get done until 10 at the earliest. So it's at least 5 hours out of your Monday. And that's always really hard starting off the week like that. In general, though, I mean, we have a good group. We really do. We have people who really care. We have a very diverse group, ideologically especially. And the thing is, I mean, I don't agree with half the senators there, but I like everybody who's in the Senate. I feel like they're all good people. Right. And even if I don't agree with the piece, I'm like, well, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I understand the concern. And in a lot of ways, I mean, like, it's like, yeah, I don't agree on like a philosophy level, but sometimes I'm like, honestly, this is probably, I mean, it's a solution to a problem, and I'm not seeing anything else. So usually I'll go with that.
And I'll say that the thing with student government, just from me, being at the Star and just being around and talking to different students, and I think, when you talk about, trying to bring more people in and kind of, create a new environment for everybody that's vastly different from what we've seen in the past, few semesters, through the Clegg administration, through the Brooklyn Bourne administration, Ruben Becerra, all those things. I will say that the organization in itself was affected by, all those things and the way the student body views student government, when it comes to, the Clegg things and seeing all those different things, like those things have, an impact on your reputation, credibility, all those things. So it is difficult going forward. I'd imagine, it's really hard for me to really speak on it, not being in student government. But I do know that just the little things, they do matter, as far as,
Well, and ultimately, and that's the ultimately frustrating part sometimes about student government is the only power we really do have is pressure, because we can't really, outside of regulating ourselves, we really can only like push the administration. Right. Say, we are the official sanctioned like body of the students, but I mean, if I say, hey, everybody should get ponies, like with their tuition, and everybody votes yes on it, it passes unanimously, President Bembo signs it and sends it to Troth, I mean, ultimately you should be like, well, no, that's not going to happen, and that's happened many times in the past. And I mean, I think part of it is a symbolic function to show this is what the students want, and the university consider that. But also, I mean, part of the frustrating part is also sometimes how futile work can end up being, because for over the past week and a half, I've been working with one of my colleagues on a Safe Ride program. Essentially, at UT, through their tuition, they get 4 or 5 Lyft credits a month for free. Because especially UT being in downtown Austin, that's a place, especially as what anybody really, but walking alone downtown late at night like that can be scary for anybody. And so essentially through the Department of Transportation and Parking, they get free ride credits that have to at least start on campus, and then they can take you elsewhere. And so we were looking at implementing that here. And so I got in contact with UT's Department of Transportation, and we had a little back and forth. She was really helpful. And then that weekend, I get a email from the police chief. He says, well, actually, UPD's been working on a Safe Ride program of our own here. And part of me is like, cool, but I'm like, why didn't you tell me this, earlier, advertise this at all? And I guess it's been in the implementation stage, and we'll see how it's going. She hasn't gotten back to me yet. That's the other frustrating part, too, is how long it takes some of these people to get back to you. And that's not a knock on them. They're busy. But it's just, especially when looking to move forward and how early in advance you have to submit legislation, that can get really frustrating. And so basically the Safe Ride program here is going to be, you can hail it with the Tap Ride app, I guess, and it's a big white van because nothing screams safety like a big
right.
van. Yeah,
right.
And so, essentially, my only gripe with it really is one, it's one van, and two, it only takes you from points on campus to points on campus. So it'll take you to Bobcat Village, but like if it's not university property, they will not take you there. And so what I'm debating right now is whether to push forward on trying to implement like something UT has, or try to work with UPD on making it more like a UT program. Because I think part of it is, one, we're going to need more vehicles to make this work efficiently. And secondly, I think really, and I understand they can't take people everywhere, but if you can take somebody to Bobcat Village, which is like 2.5-3 miles away from the main campus, you can drop somebody off at like
5 minutes.
The Vistas or the Local or in these places close to campus, much closer than Bobcat Village is. And so I'm waiting for her to get back to me. But then, ironically of all, a couple days later, actually I think Monday this week, yeah, I think it was Monday, our Department of Transportation and Parking reached out to me and said, hey, we're going to look into it. We'll contact UT. And I forwarded them the emails I already have with UT. I'm like, hey, already did that for you.
This is Transportation Services?
Yeah.
Reach out to you?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm like, hey, already did that. But also, I don't know if they know about the UPD thing. And I don't want to like nag them, but I would be like, hey, have y'all heard about this already? And so part of me, it's kind of bittersweet because like it was cool, to reach out and make contact. But like now just seeing that, it's like, it was hours like writing emails and making contacts and stuff.
It's crazy, like just even from the journalism side of things here at Texas State, there's been so much, when it comes to reaching out to the hierarchy of the university, the administration, all those things. Like you'll sometimes find a trend that they do, sort of take their time when it comes to certain things. There was a trend last semester. I can't forget it. Where we had, news reporters who wanted to do stories, so they'd be reaching out to whoever it is, at the university, and they get back to us and say something along the lines of, well, can you send me your questions in the email, prior to us doing the interview?
Yeah.
Which, if you know anything about journalism in general, that's a big no-no.
That's not what it's about.
One, because you're not getting the full honest answer. You're able to prep for all those things. And it's just a big no-no, right? Yeah. So, you see that, and then on top of that, you go back all the way to the column days in fall 2017, where you had, individuals who are now, because of that situation, reluctant to really, talk to the star, work with the star as far as, getting interviews and all those things. So it's just, you see a lot of those trends, when you're, a big part of the university, such as student government, the STAR, KTSW, all those things. When you really want to get things done, there are those loopholes you have to go through to get there. And
actually, I want to ask you about your days as an opinion columnist. Is there any like one thing you wrote that you felt like really passionate about that like it's still either like isn't changed, or like is there like still something like your pet peeve that you wrote about?
I think it's a trend you see with a lot of columnists, is that I think it's actually the flip side of it is that, as a person, especially coming into college, like think about it, I was a freshman when I became an opinions columnist. Now I'm a junior. I'm 20 years old. I was 18 when I was writing columns. So I've changed so much as a person. My worldview has expanded so much since then. So now it's more so I look at my columns and I'm like, I could have developed this way better. I could have, threw this perspective in to convey this opinion a little bit better. So it's more of those things where, you look back and it's like, okay, I could have done, a lot better. I could have, or maybe your opinion is just completely different from what it was when you were younger.
Now people grow and change their opinions. Actually, interesting thing on that, I want to talk to you about Carson King. Have you heard about this at all?
No.
Okay, so basically, last Saturday it was an Iowa football game. He had like this gigantic like poster. It was behind like, how ESPN does like college game day stuff. He had the panel of guys talking about, the matchup and stuff. And he has this gigantic sign that says, Bush lights the flow running low. Venmo me at whatever. So people were, pitching him $5-10 to go buy beer for his frat. And because it was a national broadcast, a lot of people saw it, a lot of people shared it on Twitter and stuff, and he raised over $1 million. And so what he decided to do, instead of buy all that beer, he decided he was going to donate to the Iowa Children's Hospital, which is like right on campus for University of Iowa. And actually, it's right next to the football stadium. And so what they do in the third quarter is they all like turn back to it and they all wave to the kids. It's a children's hospital. And so they all wave to the kids who are like watching the game from the hospital, because it's taller than the stadium, so they can kind of look down and watch it. And it's a really cool thing. It's really, and so he got like the whole like Bush Light Man of the Year thing. And he was, I mean, they were putting his face on like beer cans and stuff. It was really cool. And they got, I think they got him like a deal with Busch Light for like next year, like it's free. And then the Iowa Register posted a story, kind of chronicling how it all happened and stuff. And one thing they decided to mention was he had some tweets from 2010 that were like, I think one was like a Holocaust joke and another one was like a joke about gay marriage, which were like insensitive. And he even came forward after the article and like publicly apologized, said, it's not something I'm proud of. But at the same time, you have to think about it's 9 years ago.
Right.
I mean, some of the opinions and stuff I said when I was, 10, I mean, even on a different level, adults looking back, over like 9 years. I mean, the person you were 9 years ago in general is not the same person you are today.
Correct.
And so I think it was interesting to add that, considering, how, I guess, off topic it kind of is in general to the main story. And so I kind of want to get your take on that as like a journalist.
Yeah, I mean, so, it's really, it's funny because we've had this conversation on our podcast over at KTSW, my partner Maria Carraza and I. And, we had a whole episode dedicated to, talking about the Kevin Hart and the Oscar situation. Yeah. And, we're at a time now where you have to be politically correct with everything you do. So I'd say just separating myself, from the journalist title, just speaking just from like a general human being who goes through phases in, his life and, grows and has made mistakes in the past and all those things. I say, there's a line, for certain things, you talk about, sexual assault, anything, as extreme as those things. Those are things that you're going to be held accountable for, no matter what time period it is. 50 years later, you're going to be held accountable, regardless of what it is.
See, the Iowa Register said kind of something along those same lines. Say, it's about transparency, it's about being straightforward about it, and just getting to the truth of the matter. And so the interesting thing that came out after that was a lot of like people in the Iowa area, readers of the Register, said, okay, let's see your Twitter feed, right? For the author of the article. And I mean, they dug through his stuff. He had tweets with racial slurs and stuff like that, like way worse than what this guy said. And so now this guy's on the hot seat at the Iowa Register, so they're thinking about maybe firing him.
And there's the other side of it is when you get into the tweets and the things that you look at someone's character from 15 years ago or whenever Twitter was created. You look at all these things, and that's where as a society we have to come together and answer the questions. Are these things that we're still holding people accountable for? You look at even something like the Dave Chappelle special that just came out.
Yes.
Something where, comedy is, such a dark, form of artistic expression. And you have people who are calling for the cancellation of Dave Chappelle then. So it's, it's really hard, for me personally. It's one of those things where, like I said, there's a line, when you talk about the sexual assault or, anything extreme, to that magnitude, like I said, those are things you can't come back from. But when it comes to the tweets and all those things,
even like jokes in general, because I'm always kind of sympathetic to a comedian. Like even if it's a bad joke, if you see, it wasn't like an ill-willed attempt, and he was trying to be funny, even if it wasn't funny at all. I mean, you have to consider that differently than just blatant like hate speech towards somebody.
And exactly, and if you look, even me, there's no telling, being, I think I was at the age of 11 when I first made my Twitter. So, if 10 years from now, somebody pulls up a tweet about me when I was 11 years old, 9 times out of 10, I probably, most definitely not the same person as I was.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I think with the reporter, that's kind of demonstrated that everybody has dirty laundry and stuff they're not proud of in their past. And when you go digging that up, I mean, it's an endless war because everybody has stuff they're not proud of.
It's a part of being human.
Yeah, it's about growth, I think, mainly.
Exactly. And that's also another thing that you can kind of add into it is, okay, what have you done? Janet Jackson has a song called "What Have You Done for Me Lately?"
Yeah.
And you look at these things. It's like, okay, let's say a person sent out tweets with racial slurs in 2011. Yeah. Well, if in 2014, 15, and 16 this person was contributing to the Black Lives Matter campaign. This person was protesting when Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by George Zimmerman, with the Mike Brown situation, Alton Sterling, all those things. then it's like you obviously see the track record of trying to do better.
Change.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where you have to, expand, what you're looking at and really look at the entire situation.
Well, even that, like, I mean, this guy donated over $1 million to a children's hospital.
Exactly.
And then actually Venmo and Busch Light both matched that donation. And so at some point, it's like, do we really have to drag this guy? Obviously, he didn't mean this. He was very straightforward. He didn't mean it. But do we still have to put that out there?
Right.
And it, like I said, it wasn't really related to the main story. That was my thing. It's like, why even dig through that and have to air that out? Even if you do find it, it's like, okay, it was 10 years ago.
Right.
Dig that out. And so it's an interesting thing because you mentioned Dave Chappelle's thing too, and that's kind of another weird angle on it because the cancellation, calling for people to cancel Dave Chappelle, is he even kind of in the special even made note of that. He said, you clicked on my face. You chose to watch this.
Right.
And so that's another thing too, is when people understand getting offended, but at the same time, you can leave that Netflix show at any time.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, these situations are such, because the one thing I don't want to do is ever discredit somebody who doesn't, who watches the Dave Chappelle special and just feels uneasy about it, or who sees tweets with racial slurs and homophobic rhetoric, whatever it may be, and discredit what they feel at that moment in time. If you see those things and you've been affected and impacted by these things, then you're going to feel some type of way about it. At the same time, when it comes to, like you said, the comedy specials and all those things. Well, one with the tweets, that's a different realm of where, like we just spoke about, people grow. With the comedy, like you said, those are things where, you never have to click on a Dave Chappelle special, if you don't want to.
Comedy is a performance. I mean, I wasn't like the world's big. I love Dave Chappelle in general. Like, I love the Chappelle show. But I mean, the latest special, I thought it was funny, but at the same time, there were some jokes. I'm like, that was kind of in poor taste. They're like, I didn't laugh really. I was like, not that funny.
And that's another thing. I watched the special, and like you said, there were moments that I thought were genuinely funny. There was a lot of subtle things in there that I caught. And then there were moments where I was like, that's a little rough.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to kind of come in and ask, if we're talking about comedy specifically, like, what is comedy? You look at historically at the Eddie Murphys, the Red Foxes, the Bernie Macs, people who are extremely rated R, vulgar, all those things. Exactly. And, if you ask any of those guys, comedy is making you feel uneasy or making you feel uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, laughter in a lot of ways is kind of the relief of tension.
Exactly.
And they make good commentary. I mean, George Carlin was like, one of the most like commentary heavy people about things. And I mean, it was still funny, but also he's making like really cutting observations about things. And same thing with a lot of comedians. I mean, they make it an entertaining format, but they also make a lot of cuts.
Right.
And at society and stuff like that, you don't really think about.
Right. And the best way I've seen somebody explain it is, if you can laugh at something that you don't agree with, that's really what comedy really is. It's bringing people to a show who are completely different from maybe from the comedian to the people in the crowd, and they're gonna, as a comedian, their art is making you laugh about the things that you don't necessarily agree with or that you feel uncomfortable with. So if you do that as a comedian, most would argue that you've done your job, successfully.
Yeah, and actually in my persuasion class, they pulled up a movie clip. I forget the name of it, but basically the guy's the president. That's not beyond it, but basically he gives a very like American speech kind of thing. But one of the things he really hits on is free speech. He says, American citizenship in a lot of ways is very advanced citizenship. You've got to want it, because it's one thing to celebrate and salute the American flag, but at the same time you should be just as vocally supportive of somebody's right to burn that flag if they feel so, because that's what America's about. You should be able to preach, speaking truth to power from things you agree with, but also to be able to understand there are people who scream from the top of their lungs things you absolutely hate. And there, I mean, of course, there's lines with that, but at the same time, that's the entire point of like the freedom of speech aspect of it. And there's people who say they're for it until it's something they don't agree with, and that's something I've always found really interesting in general. But in the same way, I think comedy is one of those special conditions where you have to understand that as a performance, it is meant to try to entertain you.
Exactly.
It's also meant to make commentary and also to help you kind of see things from a new perspective and to laugh about it.
And like I said earlier, looking at, if you ever want to question, maybe a comedian's character, look at the track record. Look at what they've done. You look at somebody like Dave Chappelle, who just put on an entire event for the individuals affected by the Ohio shootings in the recent months. So, you look at these things, and among other things that, that a lot of people don't even know about, other, comedians, like the Kevin Harts and, the Steve Harveys, all those people, who have had, massive impact in communities, impacted by whether it be poverty or devastation, mass, whatever it is, these are people who have been active in the community.
They do a lot of good.
Exactly.
And I mean, that's part of it too. I mean, even because Chappelle's, one of the iconic comedians that like to push the envelope, especially on race issues and stuff like that. In a lot of ways, I think comedy is a healthy way to do it. I mean, of course, you have to do it tastefully. Tastefully is the most important thing, because I think in a lot of ways you can joke about just about anything if you do it right and if you deliver it right and if you do it tastefully. And so in a lot of ways, I mean, it's you take really tense issues like race, and you kind of you go up to that line, you play with the line, and you kind of introduce different perspectives. You show different ways of thinking about it, and you also expose people to different experiences and stuff like that. And in a lot of ways, when you can, like I said, like laugh about this kind of stuff, it becomes less scary and it becomes easier to talk about.
Exactly.
With other people, and that helps build an understanding in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to just say, I can, I very much, agree that, comedy is a space, at least for me, because I've watched, the Chappelle specials. I've watched, the Lil Rels, the Mike Epps, the Kevin Hart, the Cat Williams, who've all may have said jokes within their specials that probably apply to me. And I can laugh at it and appreciate that, these things are what's sparking conversation. Like, you look at the Dave Chappelle special, and then go look at the tweets that came after. All you have people that are, hammering, Chappelle for the jokes that he put out there and all those things. At the same time, you have people talking about the issues that he was discussing in the special as well.
It builds good dialogue.
Exactly. So people are talking for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the ability also to like kind of be able to laugh at yourself and take things lightheartedly. I think is just a good way to get through life. Is to not take yourself that seriously.
Most definitely. It's a tough world out here. So anytime you can take a second and laugh at all the craziness we have going on, it'll be beneficial. It
makes life that much easier. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and while we're on break, here is new music from Commons.
So tell me what's your name, 'cause it's been a while, and I'm sure that it has changed, 'cause that's what you're good at. So tell me, how's this place? At least now you have a warmer bed to stay, but that's not what you're good at.
All right, and we are back. And actually, Jaden, we don't have any guest questions for you this week, but I do have a bone to pick with you since you're a Bears fan.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yes, indeed.
Why do you have poor taste in teams? That's my first question
hilarious.
for you. Why do you hate? Why do you hate good teams?
Well, one, I'll tell you that the colors green and yellow are the most disgusting two colors to ever be put together.
That's
ever.
False.
So we'll put that out there.
We were first. We were the first franchise. You can't.
The thing, about the Bears right now. See, I'm not gonna come in here and roast Green Bay because of that Week 1 performance we put up offensively. So I'm gonna hold back the punches as far as the Green Bay roast and all that. But I will say that we do have a long season, and we'll see what happens in a couple months.
We already beat you week 1. I'm just saying.
You know, week 1 versus they beat us week 1 last year too, and we all know how that ended up.
Still a great game.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I don't know. So what's your? Why do you mean? Because you also like the Bulls. So I mean, you're obviously a fan of Chicago in general. Right. So what's the story with that?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Chicago. Yeah,
Okay.
So you know, my dad still lives there. All those things.
Okay.
So I grew up. You know, I spent the first 9 years of my life living in Chicago. So grew up, whole family Bears fans. You know, had a Super Bowl party when the Bears made the Super Bowl in 2007 and played the Colts and lost. Yeah, yeah. You know, been to Bears training camp practices. Been to Bears game, all those things. Going to a Bears game, I think in November, if everything goes according to plan.
Actually, funny enough, I'm going to a Packers game here.
Oh, really?
When they play the Cowboys, my dad and I are going up to Dallas to go.
That'll be a good game. I hope the Cowboys win though, because we need a little cushion in the division for the Packers.
because you guys are sitting on the bottom.
Yeah,
right now with the
I mean, it's all right.
Vikings.
It's a week to week thing.
How are the Lions undefeated?
And here's the thing about the Lions is that I wouldn't really put too much stock into it because we all know that they will implode at some point.
Yeah,
it's
they can't. They can't not.
It's inevitable, and they have to play. They still have to play Minnesota. They have to play Green Bay, and they have to play Chicago.
They have to play real teams going forward.
Yeah. So, but yeah, just growing up is that, and then even when I moved to Houston, I was still in Chicago every summer, spending with my dad and all that. Still, all my family is there.
Yep.
Been there twice this year. I'll actually be there next week. I'm going back to Chicago.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my family's the same way. We're all in Wisconsin. We're the only members of the Cleveland family that are south of Chicago.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so it's because my dad's military background, and that's kind of the one thing that's helped, I guess, just with family bonding in general. Because both sides of my family are huge Packers fans, and so no matter how long it's been, from seeing around, the easiest way to start a conversation is to start talking about the Packers.
Yeah,
and I mean it's a lot of ways, and some folks hate on football because they don't get it. I think a lot of ways. But I mean, for me growing up, and I mean, I would assume the experience is probably the same for you. I mean, football's a really good way to bond with people. I mean, especially my dad. I mean,
it is. And it's interesting you say that. That's something that my dad and I actually a lot of things during the Bears game. He'll FaceTime me.
Yep.
Before, in the middle of the game, and after. That's kind of our thing. That
we always call my dad whenever the Packers are playing. We always talk. It's nice. It is nice. And the thing is too, especially because my dad and I are we're very hard-headed and we're very similar in that way, and we argue with each other a lot, but it's so funny because we'll be having a shouting match from across the house kind of thing, about whatever happened, and then as soon as the Packers come on, we just sit down and we're quiet and we just watch the game together and we put everything on pause.
At the same time, you get so emotionally attached to all these teams, and then when the losses happen, it feels like the world is ending. I remember last in February with the Cody Parkey double doink. That was probably the worst feeling I've ever experienced as a Bears fan.
I think that was probably one of the ugliest laughs I've ever unleashed in my entire life. Watching that as a Packers fan, I'm like, ah!
It was so tragic, and it took a long time to get over. And this season, hopefully, take it week by week. Never know what happens, but
your new kicker looks pretty good.
He does. Eddie Pinero. Yeah, so that's the least that can happen for us is that we have people that make kicks. But obviously, when one problem goes away, another one comes up. So we got to get the offense together.
Yeah, and the offense. I mean, Green Bay's offense has been lagging behind too. Our defenses look like world beaters.
Yeah, they look pretty good. But I'm interested to see how they fare out because we both have similar schedules this year.
Yeah.
So the Kansas Cities. I'm not sure if the Packers played the Rams, but I know we played them. The Cowboys, so all the Saints, so those are all the Chargers, all solid defensive teams that'll be a good test for us.
Well, I'm worried because Packers played tonight, and I hate Thursday night football. I do, and just because it's 3 days rest for a game where you are physically exhausted after a game like that.
You've seen a lot of players like Richard Sherman specifically who've come out and who he actually tore his Achilles on a Thursday night game.
Well, because they're exhausted. They're physically not ready to play yet, and you force them to go out there and put on a full performance.
It's tough, but that's the NFL culture for you. It's we pay you, so you need to go out there and perform when we take you.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's you're not doing as an NFL, as the whole, as the Shield brand, you're not doing yourself any good if your best players are going down with injuries early in the season. You're not going to get the same viewership.
Yeah, very much true.
And I just
forget that those are humans as well.
Yeah.
Who need recovery time. And you're not talking about going out there and playing going to the rec and playing a basketball game. We're talking about a full 15-minute quarters, going out there hitting each other, laying it out on the line, tackling, all those things. that have a huge toll on your body.
I mean, and the reason the NBA can do stuff like that is because it's still physically training, but it's 5 guys, and usually have a deep enough talent level to where you can still rotate guys or give guys nights off and stuff if they really need it.
And the wear and tear is nowhere near the same when you talk about contact. You know, in basketball, there is contact, don't get me wrong, but as far as being a running back being tackled every single time they touch a football, several times, how many times throughout a game, depending on how many touches you get, 25 to 30
or even,
sometimes.
Linebackers too.
Right. In the trenches, the offensive linemen and defensive linemen, every play of the game, they're getting.
That's kind of a different thing because you have to look at also the speed in which they make contact. Because usually, their power. These guys are upwards of 300 pounds. Are powerful guys, but thankfully, it's not like sprinting across the field at each other. That's most concussions happen on kickoff.
Right.
Because you're running full speed at each other from 20 yards away, and you're hitting each other usually head on, and that's a big issue with that. Actually, since we're talking about kickers earlier, did you watch the game last Saturday for Texas State?
I did. Yeah. I actually caught. So I caught the first. What happened was, I caught the first 3 quarters, and I was like, all right. I kind of seen this narrative before, so I turned it off a little bit. Then I come back and I go on Twitter, and it's like Texas State has won in 3 overtime thriller. And I was like, okay, so the one game, because I watched all the first few games where we lost against A&M, and the one game against who did they play after that? They played who was it?
SMU.
Before the SMU game. We played. It was Wyoming. The Wyoming game. I'm watching the Wyoming game. I'm like, what is going on? Like, you have the momentum. It looks like a winnable game, then you get let down. So, it looked like a situation like that. But they came through. So
and really, because Georgia State beat Tennessee the week before that, so Texas State is better than Tennessee. Yeah, that's the way I'm going to break that down.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know, man. Like, part of me I was kind of bummed out by the lack of attendance in general at that game because there was hardly anybody there, especially towards the end. And I actually, that night I got home and I was just, for whatever reason, just kind of hit me. I was like, I need to write to the athletic director about this. And so, he hasn't gotten back to me. I'm kind of upset about that. But he's going to be at the student government roundtable on Monday. So I'm going to come up to him and be like, what's up? Like, hey, I know you saw my email. Like,
here's the thing. Everybody has these different ideas of how you can get more students to the games, get people to stay throughout the quarters. The solution is really simple. You have to win. You have to win games. And you have to do it consistently.
And hopefully that's starting now.
Right. So, bringing in a new coach isn't going to get the job done as far as, consistent attendance across the board. You have to win games. You have to continue to, build the culture that invite students to want to come to the games, right? So all those things play a part. So, this season will be telling, and, you have to think about it also from the general fan perspective. There are most, people in the student section may not even have any knowledge of how the game works or how football is played, whatever, the ramifications are for being a football player. So when they see losses, automatically doesn't matter how you lost the game or what happened in the game, you lost the game at the end of the day. So you get blown out by A&M, even though people who really, follow Texas State athletics and cover and do all those things, they you can kind of predict that going in. It's like with the general fan, it's, oh, we lost, so we suck. Yeah, and that's kind of
And so with my letter to Tees, I wrote I pitched them 2 ideas. They weren't mutually exclusive, but they would probably work better if they were both together implemented. Basically, first thing it says, we need to start having more noon kickoffs because we kick off all of our games at 6 almost every time. And I said, in San Marcos, partying is like semi-religious around here. Like you go out on Friday, Saturday nights.
Right.
And so people usually leave at halftime because they're getting ready to go out for the night because those games run late and you're going to miss a lot of parties if you stay for the entire. I was there till like almost 11 watching that overtime game. And so I think that's one part of it is if you start kicking off at noon, I think on one end, tailgates probably won't start earlier than like 9 o'clock. And that way, because usually our tailgates start at noon anyway. And so people have been out there in the sun tailgating for 6 hours. And I was saying, I'm speaking from experience. 6 hours at Bobcat tailgate tires out anybody. And so the last thing I want to do is go to the game and scream for another 4 hours. And so I'm thinking if we kick off at noon, tailgate probably starts around 9 at the earliest. That's 3 hours at tailgate. Still a good amount of time, but also not 6 hours. And so hopefully they'll get people to come because also at noon you're going to have less of an excuse to leave for something. At least show up for the game. Because I think the players will play better too if you actually have a packed stadium, especially on defense. You think about how much noise can contribute to messing up an offense or putting pressure on an offense. So I think that helps in a lot of ways too. And I think the other part of it, and the part I'm really concerned about and looking to want to implement, is lowering the price of concessions in general across the board for athletic events. Because right now it's $6.50 for a Bud Light at games, which usually you can buy a 6-pack for roughly that same price at like Walmart.
Right, bizarre.
Yeah, and so it's really overpriced, and also food is expensive as hell there too. And so what I'm saying is, if we start making it cheaper, like we have like $1 or $2 like hot dogs, beers, stuff like cheap food like that, where I think you're going to encourage people to come to the game, and hopefully stay for longer because they probably won't get hungry, they won't want to leave. Also, people are concerned about maybe putting more alcohol in circulation, but at the same time, you have to have the wristband to buy it, so you could have at least more legal consumption of alcohol. And of course, you could always buy it for somebody else, but I think that's more on the stadium security to look for that kind of stuff. But and the thing is, I gave him 2 examples because Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns, our division conference rivals,
solid team.
Yeah, they started implementing it this season because they had the same problem with attendance, and so far it's been working to great results because people are coming and they're staying for longer and they have more reason to show up for the games.
Also, I would say though, like earlier, Lafayette's been winning some games as well.
Of course, winning is definitely the main ingredient for all this to work.
Right.
But at the same time, I think having the fan attendance there will also help us maybe give us that X factor over the edge if we have more people there and cheering our guys on. Because I would feel kind of deflated, especially as a player for Texas State, seeing like 20 people in the stands when I'm like pouring my heart out on the field. Yeah. And so I said, you got to lower the concessions. I said Louisiana Lafayette is doing that to great results. Also, they're playing better, which hopefully we'll start doing soon. And then the other part of it, the other example I gave was the Atlanta Falcons, because they sell like $1, $2 beers and stuff like that, and they get better attendance for the games and stuff, especially on like weeknights and stuff. They also have a Chick-fil-A in the place, so that's more of an incentive to show up on, because of course they're closed on Sunday, but you'll get them to come at least for the Thursday night games, which are always hard sells.
It's all about, to me, like I said, it's all about that culture, man. Yeah. You have to establish that winning culture. You look at even take the winning out, just the culture. Like you look at UT, you look at A&M. No matter if they're 0-8 or
people are still
whatever. Exactly, and that's just years and years and years of tradition of building that culture of having winning seasons. Losing. But that's something that Texas State has to build, and with as much money that goes into the athletic department, it's something that and most students they argue that we shouldn't even be putting that much money into the athletic department. So you have to change the narrative.
Hey, I'm interrupting this podcast in the future. It's currently 1:30 a.m. on Friday, and I'm in my PJs, and I just discovered that the audio software stopped recording at this point. So don't worry, you didn't miss much more. Me and Jaden just talked football for a little bit longer, and then we were quickly hurried out by the next people who had the room reserved, some D&D fellows, and I hope their campaign went well. Thank you so much to Jaden and Edison for coming on the show. This is probably one of the best episodes yet, and it's a real shame that it has to end with the audio software deciding to stop working. But that's life, and if that's how it's got to be, then that's how it's got to be. Follow us on Twitter at Sandmo Show if you want sand more. And I will see you guys in the next one, where hopefully I get to the bottom of this.